This program is brought to you by cable franchise fees and generous donations from viewers like you.
Finance Committee for May 4, 2021 to order at 1 o'clock. And this is a meeting that is being held as a virtual meeting pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18. Since we're doing this by remote participation, I'm going to check with each member of the committee to make sure that they can hear me, and by their response that we can hear them. So start with Kathy Shane, Vice Chair.
Yes, here and I can hear.
Lynn Guzmer.
Present and I can hear.
Bernie Kubiak.
Present, I can hear everyone.
And Dorothy Pam.
Yes, yes.
Pat D'Angelis.
Yes, yes.
And Bob Hegner.
Yep.
And Jane Schefflers.
You're here.
Okay. The agenda for today's meeting starts with, after the call to order, which we just did, to go to an overview of the town manager budget. And I don't know if you wanted us to wait if Paul is joining us, Sean, or if you're going to do the introduction.
So I haven't heard that he's not joining us, but why don't I start, and then when he hops on, we can see if he has anything he wants to add.
I wanted to say one thing before we start off, is that last night, of course, I didn't say anything because we had just received the budget, but I spent several hours going over it this morning, and it really is an impressive document and ties together the goals that we're trying to achieve, and is a really well-designed, friendly document. Obviously, it was a tremendous amount of work, and I want to thank all of the staff who were present on this. I saw Holly, was here previously. I'm not sure she signed off. I see Sonia, I know you're here. But I really want anybody who I've missed, I just want to thank everybody for a tremendous effort to do that. So Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. It was Holly, Sonia, lots of department heads, Paul, others. You know, it's easy putting together the document. It's hard then going through and checking everything to make sure it all, goes back and forth, because there's so many figures in the document. But thank you. I'm going to share my screen in a second and pull up the document and just do a quick walkthrough of some of how it's organized and some of the key pages. Before I do, I just wanted to check and see, has everyone been to the Engage Amherst pages before? Is there anyone that hasn't been, that wants a quick overview of what's on there? I see Dorothy. Are you okay, Andy, if I share my screen and go there real quick and just show people what's available on that page?
Sure.
Okay.
Dorothy, did you have something you were trying to say, or? I can't hear you because you're muted.
No, I had not engaged Engage Amherst yet.
Oh, you definitely should. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's see, screen one. So hopefully you see it on your screen. It may be a little funky looking because I have wide screens, but if you go to engageamherst.org, it'll bring you here. And if you scroll down to, there's multiple initiatives that are going to keep coming up on here. So it's good to get comfortable with this page. The budget is the featured one right now. So you just click on Learn More. And hopefully you all see it switch over to the FY22 budget. And there's a little bit of a sort of a greeting. And there's lots of different tools that people that we can put on this, but they're the two that we've selected for this process is a Q&A, which allows any people to submit a question, and that question will come to us. We can review it, make sure there's nothing problematic in the question in terms of language or anything like that, and then we can answer it, and it'll create a running list here of the questions and the answers, and it will also send an email directly back to the person who submitted the question with the answer. So it's a really nice tool, and anybody who's listed on this, who's listening over here on the right. Right now it's myself and the communications manager, Brianna Sundred, gets that email. So we can add as many people over there as we want. And then there's another tool here that's feedback. And if you click the feedback button, you can submit feedback as well. I'm not going to do it right now, but it lets you submit an open-ended response, and it also lets you, we put the goals, the town manager's goals there, so that people could kind of weigh in on what ones they feel are most important to them.
Sean, a question. Is there
Yeah.
some way that the user can make the type bigger?
Oh, yeah.
The type on this, this looks really, again, small, because I can't really control it because it's a web page, but I'll make my it up bigger when I go to the budget document.
How would a user do that?
So when
wanted
you
to do
go here, it'll be much bigger than what you see on your screen, I think, unless did you go to it on your computer?
Yeah, and Dorothy, on your computer, you can just enlarge what you're looking, the computer. I can
By
tell you
using
how
your
to-
fingers on the screen, on the
Yeah,
pad?
you can always make the image bigger, so I can,
Okay.
if you.
'Cause sometimes some images allow you to do that and some don't.
Yeah,
There's
no, you're right.
on your keypad, you can actually just expand it, even if it's not built in, you can make the picture bigger.
And then the
I'm
last thing I'll just,
nearsighted, so I need to do that a lot.
Yeah.
and the last thing I'll just point out is on the side here, the other nice thing about this page is it kind of links to all the main things you need to go to. So it's got links on the right to the budget document, the capital improvement program, the presentation from last night, the budget calendar, town council goals. There's some FAQs there, and we're going to add key dates to it as well as meetings come up. So it worked pretty well for some projects so far, so we're going to keep trying it.
Mhm.
And
Sure.
I
I just have a quick question, I think this is great, but a year from now or at some point in the future, are you and Brianna going to be able to assess the payoff to the extra time this took, in terms of users' comments? Because I'm assuming this feature, as opposed to the book that you put up, took a fair amount of time, somebody's time. So,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so it's actually not as bad as you would think, because they're sort of, templates. And so it's really just updating the template with some of the information that's already in the budget document. But to your point, it is more time than if we just didn't do anything and we just relied on sort of meetings to facilitate some of this back and forth. So there is more time there. The nice thing about this tool is it has a lot of data analytics that you can see of how many people visit the page. There's also like deeper levels of data, like how many people actually engage with the page. So not just visit it, but actually like use one of the tools. That's one of actually the strengths of this program, is that you can see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that Brianna can analyze. Is really useful to see, what people are doing.
So
Does-
Sean,
I might, just to follow up, because what I might do at a district meeting is demo it and ask people who have always wondered about it, to try to go on it and see, and ask them just to then submit comments on, going the normal way to look at the budget versus could they find things more easily? Could
Yeah.
they,
If you want, maybe if you're okay with it, maybe I'll just email Brianna and Paul and just let them know that you're thinking of that. And Brianna can probably reach out to you. She's the expert on this.
Okay,
So she can
great.
probably reach out and let you know the best way to do that.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
so,
and we
Sean,
would,
I had a question.
Oh, Paul's here.
yeah,
um,
and so we would really appreciate you doing that too, Kathy. So thank you for thinking of that.
So here's my question. We have, let's just say, a constituent who wants to know lots of answers and hasn't really been following the meetings and doesn't know how to find them. So, and for example, if they wanted answers about the library, could I say, go to engageamherst.com or .org, which is it?
It's .org.
.org. And then how would they find library?
So the library, I don't believe, is a project specifically on here. And I don't want to take up too much time on this, but I'll just show one thing real quick. Let me just go back to the main
Yeah,
page. So there's a 4 building projects one that has some Q&A on there, really. So financing the future. So we set this up for the 4 building project plan.
Okay.
And so the really nice feature that we've heard in the past of like questions get asked and then they get asked again and again and again. And so it'd be nice to kind of catalog them. That's one reason why we try to direct people to use this tool, because so this is all the questions that have been asked are right here. So you can see, again, this is really small, so I apologize. You probably can't see the actual question, but there's a question and then there's a response, and then there's a question and there's a response. And so you can see everything that's been asked so far and the response. And that may, kind of builds an FAQ document or a question document for people to review. Okay.
So if they can't use this then for the library, they would go to some other place to find that, the budget and the plan or whatever.
So I think so the library project itself, yeah, I think because that's kind of already come up to the council for a vote, it would be sort of too late for something like this. But the library's webpage has a lot of information as well. That might be a good place to start, is to go to the project page that the Jones Library set up.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And there is that there's that very long question document that we all spent a lot of time on. That they probably should start there.
Okay.
I think that is, and that I'll send you the link after, Dorothy. That is posted on our website. So I'll send you the link to where that long question document is for the library.
This is really great stuff, though. So congratulations to everybody who put this together. I think this is really very helpful. I've enjoyed looking at the Engage site. And Sean, I'm going to, I'll log on at midnight during your Ask Me Anything. And on Twitter, no less.
Yeah, I think I got one last year that was sort of off hours, but otherwise most of the questions were fine. All right, I'm going to switch over to the budget document. And I won't, again, this is just going to be a high level overview for those who haven't had a chance to really kind of dig into it yet. Is this size okay, or is this small on your screen?
I think it's fine.
Okay.
It works for me.
It's okay for you. Okay. So I'm just going to go through. So one of the new features we added this year, and a lot of the stuff we added was it's related to the GFOA, which is the Governmental Financial Officers Association. It's they have a sort of best practice listing of things, and so a lot of stuff we added is related to that. So one of the things is sort of a really brief summary that if somebody just wanted the highlights of the budget this year, they could go to one single page. And so that's what this is meant to be. And we know that this isn't perfect this year, that we added a lot of new stuff, and we'll refine it based on the feedback we get. But that's what this page is meant to be. What's the budget? How's it allocated? What are some of the highlights? What are some of the key dates? That kind of thing. Table of contents, if you haven't tried it yet, the nice thing about the table of contents is you can click on the number and it'll bring you directly to the page, so you don't have to do a lot of scrolling. So, if you want to go to what's new, you can just click the little 14 and it'll bring you to that section in the budget document. So when it's a long budget document like this, it's nice to have that. And I will just go back. So it's organized into 5 major sections. Executive summary, which has town manager's budget message, has the goals of the council and how the budget supports those goals, and some really baseline financial information. I think we're going to take that section and probably create a separate document on the web to put on our website. And so it can be like a standalone little executive summary if people want a shorter document to navigate. That kind of gives them the complete picture, but not with too much detail. And then the second section is organizational. So that's sort of high level planning, challenges, our staffing, org charts, things like that. Then you get into the stuff that is very similar to how it's been done in the past, maybe with a little bit different coloring and pictures and things like that. But the financial section has a lot of the same departmental information that you're used to seeing in the past. And I imagine will be probably the guide us through our department meetings with the coming up in the next few meetings. And then informational section has things like the indicators report on our policies, OPEB. There's a link to the capital improvement program because we're trying to stay under 300 pages and didn't want to they don't want to break that barrier. So we just link to some of these documents instead of putting them in the whole thing. And then the nice thing that, we heard some feedback last year that I don't know if people have seen it yet, but we put the anticipated appropriation orders related to the FY22 budget at the very end. So if you go to that page, you scroll down, and I want to thank Sonia because she does a really good job of staying on top of all the votes we have to take. It's not easy to figure out all the votes, not just the votes, but where the votes are coming from, because it's not always intuitive and tie nicely. But on that last page, you'll see all the FY22 votes, what they are, where the funding source is. And this will help keep us on track as we go through the process to make sure that we hit all these different things. And then the only other thing I'll point out right now and see if there's any questions is, we've talked about this a little bit already. So this page right here is consolidated spending summary. It sort of gives you the complete view of the budget. It has the general fund budget, which includes the capital improvement program. And then it also gives you the enterprise funds. So if you wanted the one place to go to see sort of the full picture that's projected right now for FY22, it would probably be this page on page 27. That should be familiar to you in terms of how it's arranged. It's consistent with how we do our the financial indicators report and things like that. Anything else, Sonia, Holly, Paul, you think we should highlight in this, or is that an okay overview?
I think it's a lot. It's different than last year. So one of the things I think Sean said, but we're really eager to hear your feedback because, we worked through this and there's a lot of things to put together. It was outside our comfort zone for a lot of us. And so I think we can do better next year. We know even after last night, there are things that we would do differently. So we want to hear all those things from you as we go through this process.
Well, Paul, you came on late, so I'll just tell you that right at the beginning, I commented that I spent a couple hours working just with the document this morning, and really appreciated how it's set up, how it's organized. It seems daunting at first, but it really is not when you spend a little bit of time with it. And I just was expressing my appreciation to all of the people, but you weren't there, who worked on it, because it really was a tremendous effort, I realize. And I, for one, appreciate it very much. And I think probably the rest of the committee does too.
And one other page I'll just point out real quick that might be helpful for some people to go to if they're not, first would be this section we added on goals. So it lays out the council's goals, and then it lays out the specific initiatives or the highlights of the initiatives that are in this budget plan for next year. So you can see how the budget sort of supports the different goals. The challenge this year is that we're still coming out of the pandemic. We still are not doing a 2.5% increase. So in a lot of ways, we're not all the way back, clearly. So it was not an easy budget year by any means in terms of the money available, and we heard from the schools. So that was one of the challenges this year. But so this will, I think, start to look better as we go forward with the things we can do. So I will stop sharing, and if there's any other questions, if not, we can switch over to the capital improvement program.
I have a comment.
Yeah, I mean, my one comment is that it seems that a lot of the likely expenditures that we're going to be able to make during the year because of the American Recovery Act are in essence not budgeted because they weren't known and they're not part of the budget itself, but they're really very essential. And how that works and how we're, what our role as a finance committee and a council is on those are something that I was thinking that we probably need to give some discussion to at some point.
Yeah, no, we certainly struggled with that. We heard some feedback on the schools as well, and we didn't want to ignore the grant because it's going to be a big part of FY22, and it specifically meant to make up for some of the economic impacts that we've dealt with and that we're experiencing for FY22. So we did want to begin to to put thoughts to how we, some ways we see spending that money. But you're right, it's sort of in this, unfortunately, the timing is not great with how that, how the grant is kind of being rolled out. It's sort of right at the same time budgets are being voted.
So other looks to go through multiple layers. Dorothy, you have your hand up. So do you have a question you want?
I have a comment. I would strongly recommend not using blue. Particularly when you had blue as headlines, the blue disappears.
Mhm.
And so perhaps using boldface or all caps, because the most important words disappeared and they really help organize the structure and make it easy to use. I'm sure that if it's printed, you can read the blue, but on the screen, it
Okay.
did not work for me.
Can
And
you give me an example of that, Dorothy, where that's happened? I'm just
when you
so I
had the
can-
whole index and you had the keywords were in light blue, and then you
okay.
had the subtopics. And the
Gotcha.
keywords
Okay.
are the most important thing in terms of looking down. It's like an MLA works cited.
Right.
You want to be able to see the headings very quickly by the formatting.
Okay. Yeah, we might be able to fix that up quickly. That might be something we can clean up.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions on the overview? So anything, because the other thing that I think we'll probably just be talking about it throughout the process is that this budget is much different and much more helpful in the way of linking council goals and future plans it back into the budget as opposed to being sort of out there in a separate world. But I think it strikes me that we're going to be dealing with those questions as we go through each section of the budget. For example, obviously, when we talk about the police budget and social services budget, we'll get into the obvious issues having to do with the recommendations of the working group and future relationships and planning for that. And just for the committee as a whole and for any, just to make it clear, I think you all have the budget calendar that Sean put together and has the dates for each meeting and the estimated time, who's going to be present, and what finance committee member is assigned to it. Couple things about this. One is that I did include, as you know, in the finance committee report town meeting, that people should send to those of us who are assigned each time to sections of the budget if they have questions that they would like to have added to the list, that they come originally through the finance committee person who's assigned to the section. And what we want to do is that ultimately that you should get them to Sean, because Sean might be able to answer some of the questions himself and he can sort who's the best person to get them to and get them sent out. And I think that that was what is understood to be part of the process. Sean, did you have a time goal for when you would like to see the questions from the committee member?
Nothing specific. I think giving the department heads, if some of it's not going to be possible just because of the condensed schedule, but and the length of the budget document. But if you can give them at least a couple days to work on questions, especially, and it also kind of depends how many questions there are. If it's more than one page of questions, you might want to give them a little bit more time, especially if it's going to be pulling data or something along those lines. So I think just kind of judge it by the length of how many questions you have and what would be reasonable. But I think all the department heads are ready for it. We met with them today. We let them know. They know who's assigned to them. We let them know that questions would be coming soon now that the budget's been presented. So they're all ready.
Any questions from the committee or suggestions that anybody, Kathy?
Just sort of it's either a question or comment. If others have a section that they would like to be reading or have questions that isn't assigned to them. So, Pat and I are splitting police and fire. If I read another section like Lynn's education, should I send quickly, should I send them to you? Should I send them to Lynn? Just to avoid duplication, that we're thinking of the same things and it's already been asked. So what would be a way? It's, or there are counselors who aren't on finance, who aren't assigned to anything. Same question. How do we make it not feel duplicative or not have different things coming in at different time periods?
I think Andy touched on this briefly. I think you should send that to the person who's assigned to that section, just so they don't ask the same question. So if it's for the schools, for example, and you have questions on those, send them to Lynn, and then Lynn can make sure she's not also asking the same one, or if she is, then she can let you know that she's already asking that.
Okay.
Does that make? I think that's how you described it, Andy, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking. So that's what I expressed in the Finance Committee report to the council, because I was just didn't want to have multiple sets of questions going in multiple directions. And I think you're absolutely right that we want to assemble them. And if you see, if you're assigned to a section, police in this, and several questions come in that are pretty much identical, that you can sort them down. The only comment that I received from a counselor who's not on this committee about this subject was that she wanted to know whether there was a way that we were going to get the information back, and what her suggestion was that we include in committee reports each time there's a council meeting, sort of a summary of key points that we've heard through the process, and not wait until the end when we have the final report, so that people can absorb that. And if they have follow-up plots that they want to pursue, that they'll know what questions to raise during the council discussion of the report can come out earlier. So that I thought was an interesting suggestion, and something that might want to try, but it's one additional thing that I'll probably be looking to the key person who's been assigned to that section to also help with, so that we can make sure that the key points get included in the Finance Committee reports that go back if we do that. So other thoughts about our committee process and working with the budget? Okay.
The only thing I'm going to ask is that there's probably going to be certain sections of the budget people are much more honing in on than others. And so when we bring those back to the council prior to the full report, I just need a heads up as to whether or not, how much time and in what way we want to bring that to an actual council meeting. I think public safety is clearly in that category.
Well, I think that's a decision that probably you need to make with Evan and Paul in one of the agenda meetings, is to how much time, if any, you want to just allocate to budget discussion prior to the final, when the budget comes out. Putting it in the report is one thing, but allocating significant time for discussion at the meetings, I think we need guidance from you in that capacity. Does that make sense? Okay. So Sean, is there anything else that you want to say on the budget as a whole, or did you want to turn over to the capital improvement
I think I will turn over to capital improvement if you're okay with that. So I'm going to share my screen again. So the capital improvement program went through the Joint Capital Planning Committee. They had it at the beginning of their process. So it was the one really nice thing about this year is that we received feedback sort of on the document itself, but also on what was in the document. And so we tried to reflect, we reflect a lot of the feedback that we received from the Joint Capital Planning Committee is in this document already. So let me just go to some of the key pages. No light blue on the contents, nailed it there. Let's see. There's a pie chart. This is similar to the pie chart you saw last night in the story map, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. This was the JCPC schedule, if anybody wants to review how many meetings there were on capital, but we had Kathy Shane was the chair of that committee and led a very robust process. We had department presentations and things of that nature. And so you can see what was discussed at each meeting. So this page is probably one of the more important. This is the summary, and it's got a lot of numbers, so I'll just do a quick overview of what it is. The top is the funding side of capital, and the bottom is the expenditure side of capital. And so on the funding side at the top, we the shaded gray is FY22 proposed, but we also project out 4 more years so that we have a 5-year plan. And so the top is the tax levy. And then below that, where you see cash capital, when we talk about a certain percentage of the tax levy, that's this row right here. So for FY22, the proposal is 8.5% of the tax levy for capital. And the 8.5% is of the prior, of the 2-year prior tax levy, just in case somebody tries to do the math. It's the last tax levy that we knew for sure when we put this together, which would have been the, for this particular year, would have been the FY20 tax levy. So we built into the 5-year plan the proposed plan that was presented to Finance Committee for funding the 4 building projects. So just keep that in mind. And when you look at the out years, you may want to, the out years are more important this year maybe than in other years because we have built that planning into this summary. So when you get to like debt exclusion override, normally that row is 0 because we haven't had one of those in a while, but since we are proposing one of those for the school as part of that plan, you'll see it in some of those out years. So you've got your cash capital, and this section here that I'm highlighting are the other possible funding sources for capital. So you've got the debt exclusion override, you've got reserves, Community Preservation Act, which is just the debt portion of Community Preservation Act, just to be clear, it's debt only. I forgot to update this term, but Comcast funding. So this is a new component this year. We're receiving money to partially offset the installation of the municipal fiber that was installed throughout town. And so as we begin to pay the debt on that, we are applying money from Comcast in this case to help offset that debt. And so that's why you'll see it running out for a number of years because it's related to a debt payment. Other funding sources, it's typically if it's coming from a revolving fund or some other type of grant or closing out a prior year capital article. So in FY22 in particular, the 761 is the closeout. It's 2 things. It's the closeout of the FY21 capital reserve that wasn't spent. That has now been appropriated for or it's proposed to be appropriated for FY22 to support the FY22 plan. And it also includes a couple other articles that were closed out from FY21. These were individual articles, one for a zoning project and one for, I forgot what the other one was, something, a smaller one. So again, this is reappropriated prior year articles essentially. And then state aid is chapter 90 funding that goes mostly towards roads. So this again kind of makes up the funding picture in terms of the cash funding. And then there's one other piece here that just to be aware of is borrowing. So if we're proposing to borrow a project, we're showing it's sort of in between these two areas because you're not going to actually start paying on the borrowing. That's going to be paid over a number of years. And so you'll see the projected debt payments. Those projected debt payments below are specifically tied to whatever we say the borrowing is. So for FY22, we're proposing 4.6 million worth of borrowing. And I believe one of the handouts in your packet gives a breakdown of what's in that number. There are 3 sort of projects, and then there is the DPW and fire station building project, the design and OPM services for that. And then if you keep going down, and maybe I'll pause after this because I see there's a couple questions, so I'll stop after this. Then you have the expenditure side. So we start with the actual debt that is on our books that we have to pay, any projected debts, which is really looking more at the out years, and then new projects that are going to be paid for in cash that specific year. And then down below, again, you have outside of sort of cash items, you have the debt exclusion override, which is a wash with the revenue source up above. So this would only happen if there actually is a debt exclusion override in the future. And then you have other, which would be the payments from the prior year closed out articles. So you have the revenue source and then a matching expense. And then state aid, same thing, you have a revenue source and then a matching expense. So it's sort of there's some times where the same term shows up in both places, and it's because it comes in and then it's spent and it goes out. And then the most important line at the bottom is over under available funding. So the FY22 plan is after going through JCPC, it wasn't balanced to begin going through JCPC, but by the end of the process, it was in balance based on their recommendations. And then you can see the out years that are more or less in balance with a little bit of flexibility as we go further out, which is normal because the out years projects are still sort of being formulated. And so those numbers will surely decrease as we get closer to those years. And so I guess Andy, sorry, if it's possible, maybe I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on this chart before I keep going.
Yeah, I think there are 2 members of the committee who had their hands up, and I had one question, but let's go with them because I might ask my question. So Kathy?
Hi, thanks, Sean, for this. And also thank you all because the recommendations from JCPC seem largely in here. So my question is on the debt service for DPW and fire, which is in here. And I do understand what it's in there for. I have a 2-part question. One is we haven't made a decision on DPW and fire, but you have, in fact, as you said, there's been a proposed way to do everything during this time period. So we are moving forward on the elementary school, and it's never been entirely clear to me how much money we've already appropriated for the OPM plus any schematic design. So it's do we need to have a placeholder for more money than that before we get to we actually have a project that we're debt service financed. So was that clear? Because there's not a line item in there for schools. And so it's a question of, were we going to use, we could use reserves for it, for example. And I don't quite know seeing how big the number is. So just for people, if you look forward, the number, the 3.4 million of that 4.6 is the DPW and fire, the two which are each well over $1 million. So I'm thinking the school will be easily that as well. So that's my question on trying. And I know we haven't made the decision, but how fungible is this as we're trying to think about it, what we're going to need in 22 for the school?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So kind of good news is that the school, the funding for design and OPM services through feasibility study was already approved by the council, and it's already in these numbers. I think it was 750,000, and maybe Sonia can double confirm for me. But we've already got a projection of that in these numbers. Is that right, Sonia? I can't see her, so I don't know if she's saying you're crazy or what.
So let's say that is the number. And then my question would be, suppose it's more like $1 million, when we're running into it, that we're moving faster and we're getting more deeply into, so that's my question. So we've already got 750, so that's why it's not going to be as much as the 1.2 million each for DPW and
Right.
fire.
And it's a little bit different process too, because you do a feasibility study. And so the contracts right now are to fund portions of those contracts through the feasibility study. The money we're asking for, or proposing for FY22 for design, for the fire station and DPW, it goes farther than that, because they don't follow the same process. That the money we're proposing would get us through construction documents and up to bidding. The money for the school, again, because of the working with them MSBA and the process they use, it gets you to like schematic design essentially. And so it's a little bit, it's not really apples to apples when comparing the total dollar amount for those projects.
Okay, and that's just the I don't know when we will make that decision, but as you know, I'm focused on the school right now. I wouldn't want to hit a roadblock just because we haven't earmarked money for whatever piece we might need in FY, because there's nothing in 23 or 24 either. So when I was looking forward, you don't hit school until we do at least I don't think I saw it. Maybe I didn't look far enough.
No, the money that we appropriated, the 750, that or not appropriate, but that was authorized already. It covers through the feasibility study up until the next stage of that project, which we're in the process of getting the OPM on board and the designer, which will help guide how long of a process that will be. But no.
Yes, that was just for you. You and Paul will know these numbers better. But if we needed money beyond that in that 23, 24 before we're going out for the whole building, which is I've been worried that we are really loading up, as everyone can see what's happening. If you go down to the line that says projected debt, in 2023 is when we start seeing the debt for the library. There's a jump up of new projects, and then it's steadily going up what we're spending on actual debt plus projected. So we have a pretty tight capital budget going forward, as everyone knows. So that's it. That was my question and comment. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
To Bernie, I guess.
Thanks, Andy. Just a quick question. If you look in the cell, the other cell, the 761, 522, there's a little red flag up in the corner.
Yeah.
And you go over, there's a couple of little green flags
Mhm.
on cells and on the projected ones. And going forward through the document, those little red flags, green flags reappear. I'm just wondering what they mean, or is that just an artifact?
Yeah, no, there's probably a way to hide them. So those are in the, so this is an Excel table. And so the red flag means that there's a comment, and I'm sure the comment in this particular case, which I can't see in the PDF, but it just flags that it probably breaks down what the 7061 is, which is, yeah.
Okay, that was my guess is those were comments that should ordinarily be hidden, but
yeah,
I was just curious. All right, thanks.
Dorothy?
Okay, so I'm still working on understanding this. When you use the phrase out years, you mean the future years, but I guess I'm used to hearing out years as meaning years that somehow don't behave like the other years, but it just means future year to you, right?
Yeah, so in this case, when I say that, I mean FY23 through FY26. Right. So not the year that you're considering specifically this year, not the year you're going to be voting on, but the 4 years in this plan beyond that.
So then you said something, and it was maybe the over under available funding. And you said the numbers would go down as we get there. And I guess we're so used to having numbers go up as we go into the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same thing. So right now, the way this over under looks, it's showing that we have available funds. We have more money that we can spend in like FY26. You'll see it shows that there's available funding of 781. That number will go down as we get closer to FY26. You know, we work with department heads to try to project out needs 5 years away, but it's just, you're never going to project out the needs to the same extent as you can the year coming up. So so that's why there's a little bit of a surplus at this point. But again, as we get closer, those numbers will start to come down.
I got it. Thank you.
Lynn?
Yeah, so Sonia, did you check, was it 750? Because I know at one point we increased it.
It's 750, yes, and it was voted in February of 20.
Okay, we originally, I think we're like 600 or something, then went to 750.
I
Okay,
think we had a placeholder of 400, and then once we got closer and knew what it was going to be, we increased to 750.
thank you. Then my next question is, I know that we start with MSBA with them saying they will not reimburse that because they already gave us feasibility money once. But then there has been a discussion from time to time that maybe as we go along, they actually might reimburse that. And I didn't, or reimburse part of that, half of that, I guess. And I didn't know whether there had been any further discussion about that.
I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think it's a hope, but not something we're going to count on. I think some of it comes down to whether or not there are parts of this feasibility study that are new and not something that have already been done before. And so I guess I just would say we're not expecting it, but we will try for it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's based on, I would just like to add to that, you know, just speaking with people who know the MSBA said, don't expect that to come through. So we're not banking on that at all.
Okay, thank you. And then, so I understand that you're interviewing and getting ready to offer for OPM for the school. And I've always assumed, I think I've been told that OPM will not be the same as the OPM for fire and DPW.
Likely not. I don't, a lot of times the OPMs for school projects are very specialized.
Right.
So I can't say for certainty that they will not be the same, but I don't expect it. We will do a sort of a bid process for the OPM for the DPW and fire station in a similar but slightly different fashion than the MSBA's process. So I don't expect it.
Okay, thanks.
And, you know, Lynn, just on looking at the bids that we do have, the one so far that's the leader didn't have fire and DPW. One of the others did have those projects listed. So when Sean says some of them are more specialized, some you saw a lot of, they had some libraries, they had some fire stations in addition to schools. So.
Yeah.
These companies have different arms.
Right.
Have different people in them. I just was curious more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going. Andy,
But
do you have
before you go beyond that page, just there are other funding sources we've used over the years in capital, like ambulance fund.
Yeah, so that's actually this other, Andy, that's one of the sources that's in this other category.
Okay.
Yep. No, but you're absolutely right.
Okay, go on then.
And just to wrap that up, there's none of that's proposed for FY22. So none of this 761 is ambulance proposed, but in the out years, in FY23 through FY26, it does show up. All right, so then the next section I won't spend a lot of time on, but it's all of the specific projects. There's a few pages of this, and you can see projects for FY22 highlighted in the first column there in yellow, and then the projects that have been identified in future years. And one of the things that Joint Capital Planning Committee was pretty clear about was there are several projects on the list for FY23 through FY26 that could be CPA eligible, and that we should pursue CPA funding for those, when possible. So that's one nice thing about the CPA process being a little bit earlier this year, is that can happen before JCPC starts. And then the next section is the description, is a description. The full write-ups of the projects are all posted in the packets for the meetings that they were discussed. So this is more of just a summary of the of each project. And one thing we added this year was we wanted to start kind of threading the sustainability lens throughout the entire document. And so one of the projects that we feel could improve the town's, reduce the town's carbon footprint, are highlighted with sort of this little green leaf. And again, that's something we'll improve on as we go forward. This particular one that's on the screen right here, I'll just highlight. You heard a little bit about it last night. This is the 100,000 that was added for FY22. That, and we suspect there'll be a recurring item for this for sustainability projects. And you can see the description there. I'll keep going and almost done. One of the new things, and this is another where we took some direction from JCPC, as we talked about projects that aren't ready to be on the 5-year plan for a variety of reasons, and identifying them somewhere else in the capital improvement program. And the first version of the capital improvement program kind of just listed them. For some members of JCPC, that was sort of confusing, or it wasn't as clear. There was a recommendation to maybe break those into multiple groups. And so we tried to do that in a way that made sense. And again, this is a page that I think we can improve over time. But we tried to put things here that are on our radar, but just aren't ready to be on the full plan for different reasons. And this is just a little chart on asset maintenance and what we spend on different facilities in town. This was prior year approved. So these are all the capital articles that were approved with balances that are 3 years or older. So any project from FY18 or before that still has money available is listed here. And this was in response to kind of getting a status check of how these projects are spending out their money. So you'll see the project. This 40,000 that I mentioned was for gateway, was for zoning. This is one of the prior year articles that's been repurposed to support something else for FY22, and you'll see that in the status. And you can see a status check for each of these. And I think the last thing I'll just highlight is at the end, you get into the inventory. Again, this is another area we can certainly will improve on as we normalize the process. But it's broken into 2 sections. There's sort of a building and infrastructure section, and there is a vehicle and equipment section. And one of the pieces of feedback that we received from JCPC was to highlight the vehicles that are expected to be replaced with the vehicles that are proposed. So the vehicles that are highlighted in red are the ones that are you'll see throughout this list are ones that are proposed to be replaced if the new vehicles are approved. And with that, I will stop.
Hey, Kathy, you had your hand up first, so I wanted to.
Okay, yeah, I just have, I have a suggestion, and I think this is sort of already in print, but under the sustainability, we had a resident proposal from 2 high school students for solar canopies on parking lots. And that generated a lot of excitement, and people were delighted to see it was going forward. I realized we've got it flagged for try to do grant funding. I'm wondering if there is a way in this document to mention that came in, whether it's a footnote, a flag, to just acknowledge it, because it's the resident proposals are seen by residents as a way to participate and to acknowledge that it influenced a decision. It's flagged in, as you know, Sean, it's flagged in the JCPC report, where it's when we received it, but whether it's one additional sentence in that sustainability, this would include canopies and originally proposed by high school students, because they were, those who weren't on the camera, they were eloquent about this. The future is now on climate. So just acknowledging that that's where that came from. So it's a sentence, a footnote, a something to make it be part of the town manager's capital plan.
Yeah, I can connect with Paul about that after, and if there's a way we can highlight that. I don't know if we'd want to put in that summary, or if we, there might be other ways we can acknowledge that we received that, and that
Yes,
is.
I'm saying that somewhere, somewhere, and particularly because you're not necessarily spending that 100,000, but we said if you need to draw it on
Right.
it, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Lynn, did you have a question?
I do. I actually meant to ask this back earlier. Any recovery money, was that in the grant line item, or are you just not putting that in at all yet?
Yeah, there's no, so again, this is one of the things that was sort of developed. The version that went to JCPC was developed sort of prior to a lot of knowledge about the recovery money. So there's not anything here specifically that's proposed to be funded from the recovery money. The one thing that's sort of related is the capital projects manager that was mentioned last night potentially would help support the buildings that are listed in this document, the development of those projects.
Okay, and then I do have another question, and that is, and this really is looking down the road as we do inventory and we decide what else we might want to do related to it. I actually have found the old inventory of property very useful because there's pictures and, you know, it just gives history of each of the buildings. And so I'm just wondering, as we, you know, upgrade, as we agreed we would do the whole inventory thing, we want to consider, at least on the property side, looking at that, and maybe even on the vehicle side, pictures of the vehicles.
Lynn, are you referring to the facility report
Yeah,
from 2015?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. That document informed a lot of what's here, and it's a really nice document. I don't know if, I guess we'd want to talk about whether that's an inventory or just something we normalize in our process every so many years. I think Jeremiah is looking at that. But I agree with you. That's a really nice document. I think Ron Bahanowitz had put it together the last time it was done. And you're right. It's nice to have that narrative to go along with each facility.
And the actual pictures.
Yeah.
It or not. I mean, people look at it and say, oh, I didn't know we owned that.
Yeah. So Jeremiah is working on that. He's finding a lot of discrepancies in the material that was in the 2015 report. So it's going to take some time to get that up to speed, but he is working on that.
Anything else, Lynn, or otherwise call on Dorothy?
I am taking the risk of asking a really stupid question, but I have a memory of us being assigned to sections, and I have notes, but I haven't gone digging through the notes. I think maybe I was assigned to the library, but I need that to be confirmed. And then we're to look at this particular budget. In other words, I need to have a much clearer description of what my task is and how I proceed with it.
Yeah. My apologies, Dorothy. Actually, Lynn brought it up earlier in the meeting. I'm going to send you the library's budget. It's not super long, which is nice, and it's a nice package. At the end of this meeting, I'm going to send it to the full group, but everyone will get the school budgets, but you'll also get the library budget, and that's the one you should focus on to review and see what questions you may have.
Thank you.
That was a very good question.
Okay, thank you.
And just for the councilor members, just remember that in last night's packet, one of the things that's included in the packet was something called budget review calendar, and the calendar had the dates for each presentation, the estimated time, who would be there, and who's the committee member assigned. And I think I sent it to the 3 resident members, and I keep trying to remember to do that every time something comes up. If I didn't get that one, I'll make sure I did. You get it too.
Thank you.
Lynn?
I do, yeah. So, but building on Dorothy's question, and Dorothy, there is no such thing as a stupid question when it comes to finance, never. Do you want us in our reviews to also look at that portion of the capital that pertains to the area we're looking at, or how are we doing the overall capital?
Do you want my thoughts, Andy, on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I view the capital sort of as a collective. It's sort of its own topic for the whole group. I think certainly if you have questions on the capital improvement program, it probably does make sense to kind of save them for when the department comes up and ask them at the same time. But in terms of, I don't think nobody was like assigned to it or anything like specifically capital. I think that's the full committee.
And we've already had JCPC who vetted it all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
JCPC's have done a fair amount of work on it. The one area that I think we need to be very careful about that is with the enterprise funds, because enterprise fund capital is not really historically done through the operating or through the regular capital plan, but is funded separately because it's being paid for separately.
Yep.
And this is going to fall on Bob Hegner, unfortunately. The capital related to the enterprise funds is something that we do need to pick up on as we do the enterprise funds.
Yeah, I was planning on doing that, Andy.
Okay, thank you. Anything else that we want to talk about? People have questions about the capital plan at this point. So we're going to have to, as we go through our agenda planning, make sure that we have allotted time to talk about that, since if we're going to treat it, Sean, as a committee of the whole, we have to make sure we have it on our plan for committee meetings.
Yeah, potentially it could be added, if we do our best to stick to our time allocations for each department, we potentially have time on the last meeting in May. After all the departments have gone, we could come back to capital at that point.
Okay, anything else? Because we're done with the budget, then we could move over. Guilford, I know, is here. I don't know that Amy Secchi's here, but we were going to talk about the water and sewer rate questions. And I know
Yeah,
that
I've got some slides I was going to bring up. We received questions from Kathy ahead of time, and I think we answer most of Kathy's questions in these slides. So I think if Guilford hops on, I think Amy was planning on, I have to look at the meeting invite to see if she was able to make it, but I did get information from Amy ahead of time. Guilford?
Amy was coming on. I'll see where
Okay.
she's at.
I know we're a little early, I think, in terms of our schedule.
No, it was just kind of doing the wheel on her, saying she was initializing. Something must have happened.
Okay. Do you want me to start, Andy, by going through some of the questions? We kind of split it up into things that Guilford and Amy would answer, and then some of them were things that kind of fell into Sonia and my world.
I'd say go ahead.
Okay. All right. So we just put together a few slides really quickly just to kind of go through some of the questions that we received. The first question, this one is for Guilford, was around the, I don't know if there's an update to be given on Centennial, but I think the more important piece is when will we sort of get to when will bids be done so we have sort of an exact cost on Centennial?
So we don't have a final estimate right now. We're still finalizing our permit with DEP. DEP could actually add things or take things off of the project scope. So we don't have the final estimate. The estimate we do have is 13, just around 13 right now, 13, a little over 13. The additional cost is basically from what they're seeing in the market in the during the bids, during the COVID, prices have gone up substantially, either from tariffs on steel that were placed into place before the COVID pandemic started, or because of requirements to how to operate during COVID, or the fact that plants have shut down and things are not available. Sort of like we're seeing used car prices now soar through the roof. It's just a shortage of material and stuff being made. We won't know the true cost or a final cost until we get a little bit farther along in the bidding process. And then we still have the ability to actually cut some things out and to reduce some things to try to bring back in. And we also were trying to reach out for more funds beyond the town to supplement any overages we might have. So that's where we are right now.
And I'll just add to that, just to step back for a second. So there was a memo in the packet that's been that was presented to that was given to the committee and also to the council that explains the rate increase proposal for FY22. So water rates are going from 4.2 per 100 cubic feet to 4.6 per 100 cubic feet, and sewer is projected to go from 4.6 per 100 cubic feet to 4.9. And so the questions that we received from Kathy were about that, but also some of the out years that were part of that memo. It gave a sort of 5-year projection looking forward. And so just again, to kind of reframe where these questions came from, that's what they're related to.
Before you go on to the next slide and you're just on the cost of Centennial, I don't know if you've done any thinking further about the question of solar panels and trying to come up with moving a little bit in the direction of net zero, even though it's not a net zero building, to try and get an understanding of what the cost would be, whether that's still capable of being in there, and what the operating expense savings in future years would be if you were able to do that. Not asking for an answer now, but I think that you do need to expect that the question is going to be asked. I know councilors will want to know.
Guilford, do you have an update on that, or do you want to wait and we can?
We should
not-
probably wait. Like I
Okay.
said, if we change the actual process in the plant, that could move the electrical usage up or down. So that's something that really isn't nailed down either. But I keep saying, and I keep telling people, you're not going to put enough solar on the building or on the parcel to make it net zero energy. It would have to be some type of solar facility offsite.
Yeah, I recognize that, but I just want to keep the question alive. Sean, you can go on to the next.
Kathy has
slide.
her hand up.
Oh, okay, Kathy, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I just so people have, those who haven't remembered, this is an increase. 13 million is about a $2 million increase from the 11 we had originally said. So it's not a small increase. So one question I had, Guilford, is this a timing issue at all, that we've got a pipeline, and every newspaper is talking about this, that the supply chain and the costs have been soaring. If we were building a year later, would it make a difference, is my question. Does anyone have a judgment? We had a comment from the people who were proposing to be the OPM for school, and they said, you should be really glad you're not bidding your school right now, because it's a crazy world out there. Just be really glad, that you're going to be doing it later. So I didn't know, is that even feasible for the town to move the planned construction into a future date that's a bit further out, and would it make a difference?
Right now, we can't really move the construction too far away because we are working in a 5-year window to get the source back online. DEP gave us that requirement that we have to have this back online in 5 years. As we move a little farther, maybe we can get some relief from that. But the one thing that's not changing in the world right now is DEP regulations. They're staying pretty firm and fixed. No COVID exemptions and no real COVID buys or waivers.
And is DEP state plus federal, or is this mainly this, at which level of government is the rigidity?
On the water side of our business, the rigidity in DEP is the state.
Okay.
And if I could just add to that, so there are multiple factors here. We have historically low interest rates, which motivates us to act now, and then we have rising construction costs, which says, oh, you should wait. And so I think we just have to make some judgments. The key thing here is that the federal government has allocated significant funds into water, sewer, and broadband projects. This is something we're going to actively pursue and hope that this will complement the work that we're already doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. I can move off this question.
Okay, Lynn?
As I recall, this facility is in Pelham. And so my question, going back to the solar, is what complications are we anticipating of running into trying to put solar on a building that's not even in our town?
Well, putting solar on the actual building will be easy. The building has an open site and has a good, actually it's kind of a western facing front. So the little amount of solar we can put on the building will be easy. It's just a matter of what does that little bit of solar give you? Does it power the computer that's in the lab, or does it power one of the filters? I don't think it'll power one of the filters, but it might power some of the smaller incidental things around the building.
Thank you.
I think that the problem that you're alluding to, as I recall, was we talked about the fact that we own a lot of land up there nearby because of the to protect the watershed. We own that land, but whether we can build on that land is a matter of either state regulation or town of Pelham regulation is the unknown. I think that did I get that right, Guilford?
It's actually state regulation will let us build they'll let us build a solar facility on watershed land as long as we're powering a watershed facility, a water facility. The really big issue is whether we really want to clear that much timberland, that forest land in Pelham to build the facility.
Okay, so let's keep going with other members of the committee. Pat?
Thank you. Guilford, you said that when you were talking about the costs, the 13+ million, you talked about some things could be cut out, and I'm wondering what they are, if it was necessary to cut them, and what makes them not necessarily essential. And if they're not essential, why are they being included?
The things we would cut out are things that maybe possibly we can do at a later time, or we could contract with a bigger contract. When you build a building, you have site work, which includes paving the parking lots and paving things like that. If we take that out of the Centennial project and put it into either a regular paving project, or we wait a year or two to pave the parking lot, that's something we can do, but we still will end up doing it. It's just how we phase it. The big things we have to make sure we do is build the building, build the clear well, build the filters and get all that stuff working. And then we can look at some of the things inside the building and outside the building. Well, we can take a little longer, or we can do it ourselves, or we can put it in another contract and maybe save a little money. That's the things we'd be talking about doing. We have kind of cut down just about everything we can cut down in the building right now that we don't think we absolutely have to need. So those are the cost savings we're looking at next.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dorothy?
I want to challenge Guilford's comment about, since you can't provide enough power to run the whole facility with the solar you could put on the roof, it's not worth doing. Because it's like saying, I can't get back my figure of my youth, so I'll just eat all the desserts I want. I mean, I think that the energy people, and I'm not a total diehard energy person, would think that everyone should do their bit, and it's better than if we don't. So argue with me.
Yes, ma'am. What I would say is right now, the goal is to get the water plant running. there may be a time in a year or two down the road where it would be more cost effective through another mechanism than building the plant and another process such as a lease type rental option with a company that does solar to put some solar on the building. But right now there's really, if we could run the whole plant off of solar that's on the building, I would say we should pay the extra money right now and do it because your savings would begin now. But that's not the case in the amount of solar we can create on the building. And that's why I would say that's something to put off and maybe do a year or two down the road if we wanted to, and then do it in a different way than bidding it out with the construction of the building and the facility.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I'm just going to conclude this and then get on back to the slides. Is just my own observations over time. We have a tremendous investment up there in Pelham. And it's if you've never been up there, you should try sometime just to go and walk around a little bit. But there's a network of reservoirs and all working towards streams that collect rainwater, store rainwater, bring it through the intake reservoir and into the plant. And you know, the amount of land, the amount of investment in that infrastructure that has been put in by the town of Amherst over the years is tremendous. So between protecting the tremendous investment that's been made over a long period of time and what we talked about previously in the council and in this committee, about just being able to get protect as many water sources as we can for the future. I think it's really important to get that big picture and keep it in mind that yeah, this is a big investment, but we also have a big investment we're protecting. Sean, you want to go on to the next slide and keep going?
So this slide, the follow-up question or the next question that was asked was, if there is an increase for Centennial, what is the impact on the financial information that we provided already? So the 5-year enterprise fund forecast that we provided incorporated the $11 million project that is in those out years, which is why the rates are going up to meet that debt payment. So one thing I just wanted to point out is that the estimate that we use for Centennial that is in those 5-year figures was on a 20-year debt schedule. It could certainly be a 30-year debt schedule. So if there is an increase in cost there, one way we could potentially mitigate the impact on the rates would be if we wanted to stretch it out. Keep in mind, if we stretch it out, we're paying higher interest costs. So it's not something we necessarily want to do, but it's something that could be considered. So that's one piece. And then there was a question about what is the impact on the rate itself if there was an increase in the project cost. So we don't have an exact number. The financial advisor hasn't worked on this yet because we don't have an exact cost of what it's going to be. But just to give us sort of a ballpark figure, if the increase in the cost was $1 million, if we paid that out off over 30 years, it would be in the ballpark of a $63,000 payment per year. So I just showed sort of the first 10 years of what that would look like. And so that equates to roughly 6 cents on the rate. So $60,000 is roughly 6 cents on the rate. And the million isn't to mean anything in particular around $1 million. I just figured that was the easiest way to kind of, if it's 2 million, you can multiply by 2. It makes it easy to think about. The next question was on comparing the 5-year rates that were given in FY21 to the 5-year rates that were given in FY22. There really aren't huge differences between the 5-year rates that were projected in 21 versus 22. There are some differences, which is not unexpected that things would change a little bit in a year. But what you're seeing on the screen is sort of the 5-year projection of rates that was presented back in June of last year for FY21, and the 5-year rates that we just provided you in the memo back in April. And so I just kind of laid it over the top so you can see what 22 projected last year versus what's proposed for 22 this year, 23 and 23, 24 and 24, 25 and 25, and then 26 is new for this year. So this is water. Water is a little bit higher, and in part that's because the consumption was lower. We're projecting the consumption to be reduced for another year, and then the debt payment itself, I think we are projected to start a little bit sooner than it was projected to start 5 years ago. Or not 5 years, sorry. Last year, we're projecting the debt payment to begin for Centennial a little bit sooner. So if you compare these rates, actually, if you get to the out years and what we just projected recently, the rate's actually a little bit lower than what was projected last year. So last year we projected that in 5 years, we would be at $5.46 for the water rate. And in this most recent one, we were at $5.24. So that actually dropped a little bit. But again, these are all moving targets that are based on assumptions of expenses that are going to change a little bit year to year. And this is the same sort of analysis for sewer. Again, if you look at the projected FY25 of sort of where we end up, it's pretty close in terms of the rate that's needed between what was presented in FY21 and now what we're presenting for FY22. Kathy, that was your question. Does this give you the information that you were looking for?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And again, a lot of the differences are on the timing of the debt. In FY21, we hadn't authorized the debt yet. We were sort of making more of a guess about when that debt would start. We have more of a timeline this year to project how that debt will come onto the books in phases. Guilford's got a much more well-defined timeline for those projects. So that's a lot of what the changes that you're seeing. And then the last piece of this was looking at the rate comparison with other towns. And I think, turn it over to Amy to talk about this slide.
Okay. And so this was at, I think it was Mandy Joe asked, just, as we're looking at how the rates compare to other communities, rather than looking at this statewide average usage of 100 cubic feet per year, instead looking at what the Amherst water user, who, obviously we're a little more conservative with our water usage in this community. And so we looked at what the average water usage is for an average Amherst household, as well as a median household. There's a couple of residences that use a lot of water, whether they're, watering their lawn and that sort of thing. And that's why the average usage is a little higher. And then the median, so the actual middle, exact middle household is actually lower because there's a lot more people on the conservative water usage side. But either way, so this shows a comparison with the other communities, which you can see. And you'll actually notice I sorted it by the average, but you'll see that when it comes to the median, they're in a slightly different order. And it's because some communities have flat fees and then water usage above it. And that's why, when you take that into account, they don't necessarily rank in the same order. But either way, so hopefully this gives a little more of an apples to apples comparison on how this is going to impact the average Amherst household or the median Amherst household. Depending on where you think you fall. And then on the side is just some information on how this is really going to impact our water bill and our sewer bill. So, for Amherst, we're looking at an average increase with the rate going up this year of, $37 on our water bill and $28 on our sewer bill. And then similarly, the median household will have an increase of $23 on their water bill and $17 on their annual sewer bill. So hopefully that answers kind of the questions that Mandy Jo was looking at. I'll take any questions.
Kathy?
Yeah, I think that's great. My question is I think the answer is yes, but if someone wanted to say, and where will the median household be by 2026? All we do is multiply, assuming that use stays about the same, we multiply it times the rate in that year. Is that correct? So if people want to say, how much is my water bill going to go up? Not just next year, but 5 years from now. Is that
Yeah,
would
so
that-
that's what they could do, at least for the Amherst usage. It
Yep.
gets a little trickier with the other communities because
Sure.
some communities, have that flat rate. So it's not as easy as just, exponentially increasing or whatever, prorating it, I guess. But yeah, that's a good way to calculate that out.
Okay, thank you for doing that change. We're a low user too. So,
Other questions? I guess, have you, by the way, Amy, have you sent this information to Mandy, since she was one who was originator of the question?
I didn't yet. This was information. It's not as easy to just kind of come up with a median household. We actually had to crunch a year's worth of billing data for every single, resident in town and kind of crunch it. And so, obviously the billing department did a lot of work with that. Yeah, so we just kind of got this together for this meeting, but certainly happy to share that.
Yeah,
And I will say that does mean that the average and the median, we'll keep in mind that that's the average and the median based on this last year. And those numbers are going to go up and go down a little bit. So, we can talk about what we want to do in the future if we want to look at water bills and sewer bill impacts like this and how often we want to update that average and median. So.
and Andy, I think this is also a broader interest. So if we can download the tables we just did, we can put it in the Finance Committee report, so that others could use it, residents trying to figure out, so what's going to happen to my water bill?
I was actually just going to ask Sean if he would mind just putting the whole slide deck into the
Yeah, I'll put it in the packet and I'll send it to you. Yep.
so that it's available to the committee. Bob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Paul or Sean, what specific assumptions about water use and sewer use going forward you've made in terms of generating these numbers?
Yeah, no, that's a really important question. So for FY22, we've projected a reduced level of consumption from what is our normal level of consumption. We're hoping that with the college and university, with their plans to come back, that it will come in better than that. But because for the enterprise funds, water and sewer, they rely so heavily on this one revenue source, we wanted to be extra conservative with sort of the projection. So we are projecting one more year, FY22, at a lower than normal rate. For water, we're usually around, I won't get the description perfectly right, but we're around 1,100,000 cubic feet. Is that right, Amy? Okay. And we're projecting, I think 90% of that for FY22. And then once we get beyond FY22, we're going back to sort of that normal level. It's something that we are going to have to monitor on an ongoing basis because there's lots of initiatives that are reducing water consumption. When these new buildings come online, especially when they replace older buildings, they're more efficient. And so we have seen sort of a steady decrease just in general. So that is an important thing to monitor as we go forward.
And I'd just like to add that, the construction at UMass, North Village is totally offline. And Lincoln Apartments are totally offline. So until they get those back, but they will be back bigger, but they'll be much more efficient than what they've been using water as.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, right now I have this on the town council agenda on the 17th. In the past, there's always been this sense that it's better to give the public a little more time once we present it to think about it and come back. So, and yet we don't require a hearing on water and sewer rates or even a public forum. So I guess I'm looking to the Finance Committee. One option is we can present this on the 17th and then not take the vote until the 24th, giving people an extra week if any residents want to weigh in. I'm open to ideas.
Kathy? Did you,
I don't,
this
I
a
don't,
response?
no, I don't have a strong, some people focus a lot on this, in town, and the message last year rippled through very quickly when that 5-year, when the impact of Centennial could be seen. So doing this, what Sean just described about having to redo things, and if Centennial comes in higher, we can go out 30 years, I mean, people are not just looking at next year, but at what's coming toward them. So Lynn, in terms of scheduling, I wouldn't want to change the rates again. I would want to be on pretty firm ground.
Right. I mean, I can go ahead and put it on the 17th, and if somebody says they want to defer, then we can still vote on the 24th. Okay.
Do we have a proposed order for this, or do we just do it as a vote on the rate and that there's no order attached to it?
I think, Sonia, did you give us an order for this today? I think I thought I saw one, but maybe I'm making it up.
I thought I sent it to you. I'm gonna check.
Yeah, I put a bunch of stuff in the packet. I thought the water and
in the
sewer rates.
packet.
Okay, it is good. Yeah, so there is an order for this in the packet.
It's in the packet. Okay, I'm going to leave the vote then on the 17th, and if some council objects, then we'll give it another week.
So if in that case, I would need to have somebody who has access to the proposed order, because I'm not on a computer that has all of it on it.
I can get that for you in just a moment. Okay.
Put that order on the screen. We ought to be taking a look at the order and then take a vote on whether we recommend the order.
Yep. Give me a minute.
And while you're doing that, I just wanted to do one thing, and that is that I know we have one member of the public who's an attendee, and if the attendee has any public comment that is directed to water and sewer rates, please raise your hand, because I would want to recognize you before we take any vote on this.
I have a question, if we have a moment.
Yes, go ahead, Dorothy, because Lynn's looking for the order.
Okay, I'd like some clarification on how rates go down. And I know that sometimes if you're talking about the mass counting in the university's buildings, that might be part of it. But for the individual homeowner, who is the person that will be talking to us in terms of increases in water and sewer, their rates aren't going to go down, are they? I mean, I'm guessing that when you said new buildings are more efficient, you're talking about plumbing and toilets, because otherwise you use the same amount of water to wash dishes, to take a bath, to take a shower. So I didn't follow that new buildings necessarily. I understand how they're more efficient in terms of heat, but I don't understand how they're more efficient in terms of water. That's number one. And number two, will any of this have any relevance to the individual homeowner?
Yeah, so it's sort of maybe a paradox is not the right word, but as we are more efficient with our water usage, the costs can rise because we bill for less. And a lot of the costs in the enterprise fund are fixed costs related to infrastructure and managing the facilities, running the facilities, electrical and utilities to run the facilities. So as a town, as we consume less water, that has been leading to an increase in the rate, because we have to charge a higher rate to produce the same amount of revenue for the fund. And so when Paul mentioned more efficient buildings, it's good from an environmental standpoint. They're consuming less water, but again, that means they're going to consume less water. So the rates could trickle up because we're making up for that lost consumption. And so a lot of new facilities have things like more efficient toilets that don't use as much water when you flush. And the heating systems, I think there's ways to use less water there too in some of the newer buildings. So the heating and cooling systems. So that's some of what they're doing. Guilford probably knows a whole lot more about it than I do.
Sonia, I'm mistaken. I don't have the financial.
I have it here. I can share it.
Okay, thanks.
Bernie, your hand is up. And
Yeah, it's just real quick. I mean, I had the experience in Deerfield of having Deerfield Academy improve its HVAC systems. And all of a sudden our water revenue went way down. And that's part of, heating and cooling is actually a big part of water bills.
so why don't I just give you a moment as you're reading it, but what I will look for is to see if there's somebody who wants to make a motion then to recommend approval order FY 2110.
Andy, I'll do that.
Okay,
So I recommend that the finance committee, or I move that the finance committee recommend to the town council approval of order number FY 21-10 and order setting of the water and sewer rates to be effective July 1, 2021.
is there a second?
Shane seconds.
Okay, so there's been a motion that's made and seconded, and what I'm going to do is what I've done in recent meetings. I'm going to go through each member of the committee just in the order that they show up on my participant list, and then if you're a member of the committee, I'm going to be asking for your vote. And if you're a voting member, if you're a member of the committee, if you're a non-voting member, if you have any recommendation that to the committee, you want to have your position stated to the council. And before I do that, Bernie, your hand is still up. Was there something else you had, or is that before? Okay. So just going in the order that I have you on my list, Bob Hegner.
I support the motion.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Lynn Griesmer.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
And let's see, Bernie Kubiak.
I agree with the order.
And Jane Scheffler.
I agree.
And I'm voting yes. I think that I have now, I got everyone, and that the vote was 5-0, and indications of support, the recommendations of the motion from the three non-voting resident members.
Andy,
And-
can I ask Sonia something real quick? Related to what you just voted?
Yes.
Sonia, is the FY21 a typo? Should it be FY22?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if that affects what you just voted. I just looked up on our grid and it's listed as FY2210, and I just don't want to mess up any order numbers. So
I
I don't know.
accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, good.
Kathy, do you accept it as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't think we need to revote.
Good. Perfect.
Somebody else has a different of opinion on that. It is the point where we said that in the agenda estimated at 3, but not guaranteed to be 3. So does the attendee have any public comment to offer? And if so, please raise your hand to let me know, and then I'll have you brought in so that you can make comment. if so, seeing nothing, no indication at this point, and I want to get back to, if I can find my agenda, here it is again. So after that, the other thing that we were going to talk about is the auditor procurement selection process. And there was an amended version that Sean has sent to us since the last meeting that has a small number of changes that were highlighted within the document. Does anybody want to see those on the screen at this point? And then I need to get on to the next thing, which is one thing that and by the way, Amy and Guilford, if you end up leaving, because we're now no longer talking about water sewer, thank you very much for all of your work and your help. And Amy, thank you for doing that, putting that answer together for Mandy's question. And we will make sure that it gets to her attention. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
The one thing that I do want to see if we can make a recommendation vote on, because we want to get it on then to the GOL committee and back to the council, is the committee charge. And, do you have the committee charge, Lynn, or do you want?
I'm getting to it.
Okay, it was from the last meeting.
I have it.
Okay, thanks.
So I think it's pretty straightforward, and it would be very helpful for the schedule that Lynn has in mind if the committee is comfortable in making a recommendation on a charge to recommend it and then pass it along to GOL. And then I think, Lynn, you had a date you'd like to get it back to the council.
Yeah, my goal was that if it can go to GOL and then comes to the council on the 17th, the council approves it, since the appointments are all counselors. And we have a process we've used in the past where I basically poll counselors to say, are you interested? And then I bring all of the names of people who are interested to the council meeting, and the council selects who is going to be on the committee. So the only thing GOL needs to do is approve the charge. And so if they approve it prior to the 17th, the council approves it on the 17th, we can appoint the committee on the 24th of May.
So Sean, do you have something that you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted to, we talked, Sonia and Holly and I talked about this. The one thing, the charge I think looks good. The one thing that we would ask you to consider is possibly adding 2 non-counselors to the committee. We were thinking probably one person from the finance office, probably Holly would serve on this committee, someone who's gone through the audit and knows what it's been like, because we've worked with Melanson for quite some time. So someone that really knows what's involved, with, at least in Amherst, with the audit, and then possibly another staff member outside the finance office. So that was the only thing that we would ask you to consider.
I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. I think it's a great addition.
I agree. And I think it's not just a great addition. I think it's probably essential to given the time, given the short timeline here.
It
Well,
actually has to go to GOLs tomorrow if you want it on the 17th, I believe.
it does.
Yeah, which is why I want to, so if we add the members, are we adding them as voting members or non-voting members? Because when you look at the block at the top, if you remember, this is put together by taking the process that was being put forward in the original memo and then adding and then just placing it into a standard charge document. That's why it's written the way it is. So was the intent to make them voting members? And given what the role is that a significant issue? Sean, do you have anything else to say on that, or?
No, I think it's up to you all. My guess is it'll probably be a consensus. Hopefully it'll end up being a consensus decision for the whole group of people. So I don't feel strongly whether they're voting or non-voting.
Because it's to deliver evaluations, it's not to make a selection, because
right,
that's the next step.
Yeah, that's a good point. The voting or non-voting is somewhat arbitrary because everyone's just sort of doing their own evaluations and then giving those evaluations. I guess the question would be whether if a non-voting member, maybe they don't do an evaluation, they just contribute, which in that case, I'd probably say it would make sense to maybe include the staff as participants in the evaluation process.
I would think you'd want to have the staff included. These audits are incredibly time intensive for the staff. So them having an input and them being able to do an evaluation is important.
Yeah, I think that the other point, and Sean or Sonia might comment on it, but as they have said before, the auditor provides a lot of direct services between the audit process and being available to the finance staff to provide advice during the year, so that it's not just around the audit, but other roles that they play, which I think is some of the, part of the concern too. Pat?
Yeah, I like the idea of it being a consensus, and I think that's how the group would work. But I do think that the staff members should be voting members. It's a respectful thing to do.
Lynn?
I'm actually going to pose that. I think the staff should definitely be there. I think they should have a serious responsibility to provide input, but this is a contract that the council votes. And what you want to make sure is that you protect staff from ever looking like they voted on an auditor that they may have a long-standing friendship with. And you really want to keep it as clean as possible.
So is the reason not to do this?
I want the staff on there, but I want them as non-voting for that reason.
So I guess one thing we might want to clarify is, so again, this committee will be doing something similar to what the RFP committee just did or the RFS committee just did that Kathy was on, which will be receiving the applications from audit firms and evaluating them against the criteria that was in the RFP document. And in some ways, the evaluation is, because of the way we structured it, there's not a ton of wiggle room in some of those items because you're saying years of experience and things like that. So this group isn't actually going to vote on anything in particular. They're just doing evaluation. So again, I would think about it more from the standpoint of, are they doing the evaluation or not doing the evaluation when you're thinking about this committee?
I guess my concern is that if we don't hear their evaluation in the end, is it going to be helpful to the three counselors? I
Right.
suppose in the discussion, there would be value. Kathy?
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to understand, because the process we just went through, we assigned points to each of various kinds of characteristics. We separately read them and then put our points on and came together. We were a group of 5. And you would certainly want the 2 staff people to be doing that. And I wouldn't want their point rating to be treated any differently than the other 3 people's. So it wasn't even a vote. We literally all looked at and said, oh, on this, if there were 3 firms, on this one, there's a spread. Why don't you talk about why you rated them higher or lower? And what you said was kind of a consensus, because actually when we came together, we all rated one of them higher. So it was more like who was number 2, but I wouldn't want them not to be assigning points with that separate independent read of the proposals. So it's not like vote. We didn't really vote. You got 50 out of 100 points and you got 99 out of 100 points was the way the review of the proposals went for the school. So I'm assuming, since you're going to set up criteria, you're going to then assign them points based on each person's read. I've not been through an auditor thing, but as long as you have enough criteria. So I wouldn't make them lesser. And then maybe the 3 voting people vote to approve the firm that gets the most points.
Well, of course, in this situation, what we're doing is going back into the sentence that says charge near the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
That they're going to receive the applications from qualified auditing firms, evaluate the applications utilizing the criteria in the RFP document, and deliver evaluations, plural, to the town manager, so that it wouldn't end up being a composite. It would be giving individual evaluations to the town manager. And of course, the question I have for you is, in the process you just were describing, were your evaluations were your points, and they were set before it was shared with each other?
Absolutely. But I read this, Andy, you could read this. I read it that if there are 3 firms applying for this, you evaluate the 3 applications and you deliver the evaluation of the 3 applications. And if there are either 3 raters or 5 raters, you can do a composite, or you can say the 5 raters, here's their rating. We literally just put them into a grid. And so when I deliver evaluations, it's not deliver Kathy's evaluation and Pat's, and I deliver it. This is the evaluation of the firm. And then what score did they get? That's how I read it. But as I said, I haven't picked an audit firm before. That is what we did with the OPM. And we said, oh, one has more points. Is everyone comfortable with that?
And just to follow up on what Kathy said, I believe probably all of that would go to Paul. So there would be a composite evaluation for each firm, but Paul could also get the individual evaluations from individual members as well. So I think you would want to do a composite, but to kind of bring the group's rankings together. But all of the information could be passed on to the town manager.
There's really no voting.
So
no, there's really not.
I don't think there's really.
So that shouldn't even be there.
That's what I was trying to say. It's not voting. This is not a voting process. That's what I was trying to say, that the whole, Pat, it's what you said. Yeah.
So I want to understand something, and it's based on the charter and what the charter says. The town council shall annually provide for an outside audit of the books and accounts of the town to be conducted by a CPA or a firm of CPAs, which has no personal interest, direct, whatever, fiscal, whatever, to the officers of the town. The town manager shall include in the annual budget a sum of money sufficient to satisfy estimated cost of conducting the audit. The town council shall adopt procedures for selection of the audit firm, and the clerk of the town council shall coordinate the work of the individual and firm selected. I find that a little strange. The report of the audit shall be filed in the form, et cetera. So how do we interpret the words shall annually provide for an outside audit?
But it's, Lynn, the
That's
key,
separate,
that's
Lynn.
not the key sentence. This key sentence shall adopt procedures for selection of the accounting firm. That's,
Right.
Okay, so we're saying we're going to just adopt these procedures, and then we're going to give everything as a recommendation to the town manager, who's the only one that can sign a contract anyway, by the way.
Right.
And okay, I have been on audit selection committees, so, and we've
The
always,
selection process is different than reviewing the audit where the council really comes
Yeah.
into play.
I've been on both. I've been on the selection of an audit committee, and I've been on audit committees. And on the selection of audit committees, we have never, in both instances, I've never had staff actually do the ratings or the voting. And it's not because I don't value staff, it's because of wanting to protect staff. It's my experience with nonprofits. So
Yeah,
I totally want staff, I mean, as many staff as want to have a say in this, be there to give us their own insight into these audit firms. I just want to make sure we don't put staff in a position of somebody later saying, oh, gee, they chose, they're biased because that's the firm they've always used. And we know we're already up against an interesting wall anyway, because we probably only have 2 firms that may even bid on this. You don't know.
Can we hear from Sonia?
Yeah, I was gonna ask Sonia next. Sonia?
I was just responding to the council annually providing for an audit. I assume that was annually appropriate funding to provide for that audit.
Mhm.
Except that
And why are we involved in the selection? Except usually the board of an organization is involved in the selection of the auditor.
I mean, I think that the problem is in the end that is this a community, was it intended by the Charter Commission as they put this together to create a process so that the audit was a function of the council, for the council to provide some sort of a oversight of the people who are handling the funds, which is all you. And if that's what their intent was, then, we just have to be thinking about it in those fashions. And I have not had a chance to talk to any members of the Charter Commission to ask that question, but what was their intent and what makes sense? I think it's sort of, Lynn is getting at it from nonprofits point of view, and I've had the same experience as an executive director of a nonprofit, that I always assumed that the auditor worked for the board of directors to keep an eye on us who are handling the funds on a day-to-day basis. Bob?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether this is relevant or not, but I know how the federal procurement process works. And it is not uncommon for technical people who would be directing the contractor to be on the evaluation panel because they have the expertise to understand, what they need and whether the vendor can provide it. What the federal government does is it keeps the names of the people on the selection panel secret. So the vendors do not know who was on the panel. You can guess, but you can't even ask. It's actually illegal to go to your client and say, hey, are you on the evaluation panel for this proposal that we're going to bid on? So I don't know whether Amherst can do that to keep the members confidential, but that's a way to get around the issue of conflict of interest and the issue of sort of someone trying to game the system.
Interesting question as to whether this process is subject to the open meeting law, and any of our staff who work on a regular basis with the open meeting law and to have an opinion on that, certainly you're welcome.
Well, when we had an audit committee, we did have to relate to the open meeting law like any other committee. So, I just.
Yeah, of course, that was the auditor reviews process. This is the auditor selection process. And I'm not familiar enough with procurement law. Kathy?
So here's an issue as I'm reading the one sentence charge. You can only apply the criteria that's in the RFP document if someone develops the criteria. So so the charge should say the committee shall develop the criteria that goes into the RFP, right? Because we had to do that with the OPM. We had to say, these are the 6 things we care about and points for each. So, or is there, Sonia, is there just a standard when you're selecting an audit committee, there's a list of 6 things you always want, and it's already got points assigned? Because what I'm reading, the one
Very long document.
So the sentence in the charter is shall adopt procedures for the selection. Adopting procedures for the selection means you come up with what you want in an auditing firm, you assign key aspects, and you evaluate them based on the criteria. So that's the part where the council is doing something. So if we have a standard way, we always do an RFP for an audit, are those already developed? What the criteria are?
Wait a minute, let me clarify that, because if you go back to the last
Holly has,
meeting and that long document that was attached and then it was revised in today's packet, the proposed RFP is in there.
right, so it's already been, Holly has her hand up, so she's probably answering my
Holly?
question. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that keeping the people that are on the evaluation committee a secret is not possible because of public record laws. As soon as, while you're evaluating, nothing is a public record, but as soon as you choose your top contender, it becomes a public record. So you can't keep people's names out of it. And just for the record, I wouldn't have a problem making a completely unbiased opinion on whatever auditors are out there. It's whatever's best for the town at this point.
It's Holly. Sonia?
Yeah, and I just wanted to remind everybody that choosing an auditing firm is exempt from 30B, so we don't even have to go through this process. So, and auditors have a standard that they have to follow that's set for them. So they come in and they tell us what they're going to do,
Right.
basically. So I think we're overthinking a lot of this.
Right. Yeah, the criteria are all in this, Andy. It's already set out. It's already set out.
Yeah.
Right.
So
We don't tell the auditor, we don't have the auditors come in and tell them what we want them to look at. I mean, we do assign some departments that we want them to review, but other than that, they pretty much tell us what they want.
And the final decision is the manager's.
Right. And normally the town manager appoints an auditing firm
Right.
and
So
signs a contract. So.
really, it's under 30B. There's nothing right now from having Paul make a couple of phone calls and bring in some firms and pick one.
Right.
But, you know, and
Right.
So,
Andy, can I say something real quick, Andy?
yeah, I was
So
going to
just to ground or kind of bring us back. So the charter, again, to the key sentence that people have brought up is that the charter calls for the council to adopt a process. So we recommended a process. That was the memo we sent a few meetings ago that said we are proposing an RFP process. We don't have to because it's exempt under 30B, but we think that since you have to adopt a process, this is the process that could work for this type of activity. So again, we are looking for the council to approve the process, which would be an RFP process. This committee charge thing kind of is a new wrinkle we have to deal with because of the charter change that we have to come up with a committee charge. But the key piece is that we are looking for the finance committee to weigh in on the process, which is the RFP document that we gave you and that we've made some revisions to.
So
Do
what
we
I
have
was
to
going
have a-
to,
do we have to have a committee? Do we have to have a committee?
The committee can be, so if we're going with an RFP type thing, it could be a committee of one, it could be a committee of five. You know, again, we went with what we thought was sort of a reasonable, the recommendation we included was what we thought was sort of a reasonable approach for this. But since this is exempt, we're sort of, there's flexibility there.
Dorothy, and then I have a suggestion. Let me hear from Dorothy first.
I think we discussed this at a previous meeting, and I guess I looked at the criteria that Sean must have sent, and I thought that I said, you're giving points for various things. Why not add some points for the sample audit? Isn't that what we're talking about here?
Kind of. That is what that conversation is what we're talking about, reviewing the RFP, and we did. I think you made another comment that we did implement into the latest version that was provided for today's meeting. You had made a comment about maybe overweighting the experience of a firm.
That's right.
And so we did make an adjustment to that in the latest version.
So I guess I thought we kind of dealt with the topic. And we seem to be agonizing. So.
No, I think what we're going to do is we wanted to get through the committee charge today so we can get it to GOL and back to the council and get the council to get to work on actually populating the committee and choosing the counselors. So what we could do is where we have it written in three town councilors on that sentence to say 3 town councilors as chosen by the council and 2 members of the finance department staff as chosen by the town manager.
No, I'm saying that sounds good.
Paul?
Did you want to have that qualified as only finance department staff, or do you want to broaden that?
And just to add to that, we were thinking that one of the members would not be a finance department staff. We were thinking it might come from outside. Potentially the might be news to Athena, but potentially Athena, because she's mentioned in that section of the charter. We thought she might be a good second staff member.
So would you just say 2 members of the staff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Does Athena get to say no?
Yes.
Only if we can.
So now I'm going to look for comments from members of the committee to this version.
I love it.
Good.
Let's send it to GOL so I can deal with it.
Does somebody
I make a motion to approve this version
I second it.
as amended.
Well, it's a motion because you don't have to amend a motion that hasn't been made.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the charge and send the charge to GOL.
And I second that motion.
Any other further discussion of this topic of the committee charge? If not, let's go through the same voting process we did before. Kathy,
Yes,
Dorothy,
Yes.
Lynn,
Abstain.
Pat,
Perhaps, no, yes.
Ernie,
cute.
Yes, I agree.
you recommend,
I recommend it.
yeah, it's just, Jane
I also recommend.
and Bob,
And
and I vote yes, so the motion carries 5-0 with
No, it doesn't.
recommendation from the 3 resident members.
It was 401, Andy. Lynn abstained.
Oh, Lynn abstained, I'm sorry. Make that correction.
I just want to comment, I think it's really good that Pat will be able to have been part of this discussion before looking it over at GOL. That helps.
Okay, so the rest of the process as revised and that Sean sent out, Sean and I are going to come up with a date to put that back on the agenda one last time for a meeting, and we will then want to recommend that back to the council. But we will this lets us go get going with the committee. So I think that that's very helpful. So is there anything else that people want to raise about the audit selection process or anything else at this time? Anything that I didn't think of 48 hours in advance that you'd like to talk about? Okay, because if not, then I think that we've done a lot of good work today, and I thank again the staff for all that they did on the getting us this budget and capital improvement plan and such a great and helpful new format, and the hard work now is coming up. And if you have any questions about what you're going to be doing as your role in it, let me know, let Sean know, whoever seems appropriate to contact, and I think we can treat the group as adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
And happy birthday, Andy.
Yeah. Hippo birdie to you.